I didn't scream when I saw my husband kissing my best friend behind the bar at our company's annual gala. I didn't throw a drink. I didn't make a scene. I didn't even cry. Because the most terrifying moment of that night wasn't the kiss. It was when I walked up to her husband, a senior executive with access to every confidential decision in that building, expecting outrage. And he just smiled. Calm. Amused. Almost proud. Then he leaned in and whispered, "Relax. The real show is about to begin." That was the moment I understood something that changed everything. This wasn't just an affair. It was a strategy. A corporate restructuring was underway. My position, after 22 years of loyalty, was marked for a transition. Her role was expanding. My husband's job was being protected. And somehow, all of it had been decided quietly, without me. They thought I would accept it gracefully. They thought I was predictable. They thought I was too loyal to fight back. They were wrong. If you've ever been underestimated, betrayed, quietly pushed aside, this story is for you. Stay with me until the end, because what happened next didn't involve screaming or revenge scandals. It involved patience, documentation, silence, and a meeting that none of them saw coming. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, if you saw what I saw that night, would you explode, or would you wait? And if stories about smart, strategic justice speak to you, subscribe. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge is the one that doesn't raise its voice. For 32 years, I woke up beside the same man. For 22 of those years, I walked into the same glass building with my access badge clipped neatly to my blazer. Routine wasn't boredom to me. It was proof of stability. Of loyalty. Of earned respect. My name is Evelyn Harper. I was 59 years old, Senior Operations Director, the woman people trusted to fix what others quietly broke. I knew every department's rhythm, every budget cycle, every hidden crack in the company's foundation. I trained managers who later outranked me. I stayed late when projects collapsed. I protected the company like it was a second marriage. And maybe that was my first mistake. At home, my husband, Daniel Harper, liked to joke that I was married to spreadsheets. He said it with a smile, but over the years, the smile thinned. Still, I believed in us. We had history. Shared grief. Shared victories. Shared silence that felt comfortable. At work, my best friend, Marianne Keller, was the only one who knew how exhausted I truly felt some days. We had lunch together every Thursday. We finished each other's sentences. She said I was irreplaceable. I believed her. Looking back, that's what hurts the most. Because the night everything cracked, I wasn't suspicious. I wasn't insecure. I wasn't preparing for war. I was simply proud. Proud of my career. Proud of my marriage. Proud of the life I thought was solid. And nothing is more dangerous than a woman who thinks the ground beneath her feet is stable, when it's already been sold out from under her. Daniel had always been charismatic. At 60, he carried himself like a man who believed he was still being watched. Silver at the temples, confident posture, easy laughter. People gravitated toward him at company events, even though he worked in a different division. He liked being admired. Marianne was different. Strategic. Polished. Calculating in ways I once admired. She had climbed quickly over the last 5 years, her responsibilities expanding, her influence growing. I told everyone she deserved it. I meant it. Then there was Thomas Keller, her husband. Thomas wasn't loud. He didn't need to be. As Vice President of Strategic Development, he had access to projections, restructuring plans, confidential evaluations. He knew things months before they became public knowledge. He moved quietly, but decisions moved with him. At the time, I never questioned how often the four of us crossed paths, dinners, events, weekend brunches. It felt natural. Safe. Familiar. But at the last quarterly meeting before the gala, I noticed something small. Thomas interrupted me mid-presentation. Not rudely. Just enough to redirect the focus toward Marianne's department. The board nodded. She received credit for a cost-saving adjustment I had implemented. Daniel caught my eye across the room. He didn't look surprised. He looked expectant. That was the first shift. Subtle. Almost invisible. Later that evening, when I mentioned it at home, Daniel shrugged. Maybe it's time to let the next generation take the spotlight. It sounded harmless. But something in his tone felt rehearsed. And for the first time in years, I wondered. Was I being gradually moved aside without realizing it? The email arrived on a Tuesday morning. Subject line, preliminary restructuring alignment, confidential. My name wasn't on the distribution list. It should have been. I only saw it because a junior manager forwarded it to me by mistake, asking for clarification on the transition timeline tied to your department. Transition timeline. I read the document twice. My role was described as legacy leadership, recommended phased retirement option within 6 to 9 months. My responsibilities were to be redistributed to emerging leadership. Marianne's name appeared 3 times. Mine, once. Legacy. It sounded respectful. Elegant, even. But I hadn't announced retirement. I hadn't discussed stepping down. No one had spoken to me. When I asked Thomas casually in the hallway if there were upcoming structural changes, he didn't hesitate. Just long-term optimization, he said smoothly. Nothing you should worry about. Nothing you should worry about. That phrase echoed longer than it should have. That afternoon, Marianne stopped by my office with coffee, smiling like always. She spoke about a future leadership summit she might attend. They're looking at fresh perspectives, she said lightly. Fresh. I studied her face for signs of guilt. I found none. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe it was just corporate evolution. But that night, as I lay awake beside Daniel, staring at the ceiling in the dark, a question formed quietly. Why was everyone planning my exit except me? The annual company gala was held at the Grand Meridian Hotel, all crystal chandeliers and polished marble. I wore navy silk. Daniel said I looked distinguished. Not beautiful. Distinguished. I remember the music. The laughter. The clinking glasses. I remember thinking how strange it felt to celebrate while something invisible was shifting beneath me. I went looking for Daniel after dessert. That's when I saw them. Behind the temporary bar near the terrace exit. Half hidden in shadow. Marianne's hand against his chest. His mouth on hers. Not hesitant. Not confused. Familiar. My body went cold before my mind caught up. I didn't gasp. I didn't step forward. I simply watched long enough to understand this wasn't new. When they separated, they were smiling. I walked away before they saw me. Instead of confronting them, I searched for Thomas. I expected fury. Outrage. Shock. I found him near the stage, sipping whiskey. I told him what I had just seen. He didn't blink. He didn't stiffen. He smiled. Then he leaned closer and said, almost amused, "Relax. The real show is about to begin." In that moment, the betrayal multiplied. This wasn't chaos. It was choreography. And I had just realized I wasn't invited to the performance. I didn't confront Daniel that night. I didn't confront Marianne either. Instead, I went home, removed my earrings, folded my dress carefully, and sat at the edge of the bed in the dark. My marriage wasn't the only thing that felt staged anymore. Thomas's words kept replaying. The real show is about to begin. The next morning, an official calendar invite appeared, leadership transition strategy, executive only. My access was restricted. By noon, HR requested a career pathway conversation later that week. The tone was warm. Appreciative. Strategic. Daniel came home unusually cheerful. "Big change is coming," he said, loosening his tie. "The company needs fresh energy." Fresh energy. I watched him closely. He didn't ask if I'd heard anything. He assumed I had. That's when the truth sharpened. The affair wasn't reckless passion. It was alignment. Influence. Timing. Marianne's expansion. Thomas's oversight. Daniel's protection. And my removal. They weren't just betraying my marriage. They were engineering my exit. And they believed I would accept it gracefully, retire early, keep my dignity, disappear quietly. They had already written the final chapter of my career. What they didn't know. I had just started rewriting it. The HR meeting was immaculate. Soft voices. Polite smiles. Words like legacy, gratitude, transition support package. They spoke as if my departure were a celebration already agreed upon. I listened. I nodded. I asked neutral questions. Inside, something was collapsing, not loudly, but in layers. 32 years of marriage. 22 years of loyalty. Reduced to a scheduled exit and a carefully calculated payout. When I returned to my office, I closed the door and allowed myself exactly 5 minutes. 5 minutes to feel humiliated. 5 minutes to feel replaced. 5 minutes to grieve the version of my life I thought was secure. Then I stood up. Because grief is loud. Strategy is quiet. That evening, Daniel mentioned how generous the transition offer would likely be. He spoke as if it were already finalized. "You've worked hard," he said. "Maybe it's time." Time. I looked at him and realized something unsettling. They thought my silence meant surrender. They thought I was too shocked to fight. Too dignified to resist. Too predictable to pivot. They had mistaken my composure for weakness. And that miscalculation would become their first real mistake. Because while they were celebrating an ending, I had just chosen patience. The morning after HR's celebration of my legacy, I woke before dawn. I didn't cry. I didn't confront Daniel. I made coffee and opened my laptop. If this was emotional betrayal alone, I might have walked away quietly. But this was structural. Coordinated. Too aligned to be accidental. I opened archived board summaries. Past restructuring models. Conflict of interest policies I had helped draft years ago. Patterns began forming. Thomas had access to long-range projections. Marianne's department had been flagged for expansion months before performance data justified it. Daniel's division, coincidentally, was protected from budget cuts affecting comparable units. And my position? Marked irredundant. Shortly after private strategy meetings the four of them attended, meetings I had not been invited to. It wasn't proof yet. But it wasn't coincidence either. That afternoon, I called someone I trusted more than nostalgia, Linda Morales, a retired colleague who had left the company 2 years earlier. She listened quietly as I described the restructuring language. Then she said something that froze me. They tried something similar before I left. Quiet removals. Strategic promotions. You need to look at the timing. Timing. That was the thread. And once you start pulling a thread in a corporate tapestry, you risk unraveling everything. Within weeks, the narrative around me began to shift. Colleagues spoke more gently, as if I were already halfway gone. Invitations to high-level planning sessions stopped arriving. Marianne was suddenly presenting in meetings I once led. Thomas praised her forward-thinking adaptability in front of the board. Daniel started coming home later. Not defensive. Not anxious. Relaxed. That was the most revealing part. They weren't worried. They believed the structure was sealed. HR aligned. Executive approval nearly finalized. My exit framed as voluntary succession. Clean. Professional. Unquestionable. I studied their body language during meetings. Marianne avoided direct eye contact now, not out of guilt, but calculation. Thomas maintained steady composure. Daniel projected subtle sympathy in public, as if preparing to look supportive when I chose retirement. It was almost elegant. They had created psychological inevitability. If everyone behaves as though something is decided, eventually the target begins to believe it too. I felt the pressure of that illusion. The temptation to accept the offer. To preserve pride. To leave before being pushed harder. But every time doubt surfaced, I replayed Thomas's smile. The real show is about to begin. Yes, I thought. It is. And none of you realize I've stopped reacting, and started documenting. I stopped attending casual lunch conversations. I stopped volunteering for committee updates. I became a ghost in my own department, appearing only when necessary, speaking only when required. But my eyes were everywhere. Every calendar change. Every email forwarded to multiple recipients. Every note in the shared drives. Marianne's early morning strategy sessions. Daniel's selective memos. Thomas's meeting requests with vague agendas. I learned to observe without being observed. To listen without responding. To measure reactions to small provocations, a misfiled report, a subtle correction in a meeting, a question I asked about budgeting. Their confidence was absolute, but cracks appeared in microseconds, Marianne's hesitation before a response. Thomas's slight pause before correcting her. Daniel's unconscious glance in my direction. Every detail, every behavior, every subtle alignment formed a pattern. And patterns are predictable. Patterns are exploitable. For the first time since the gala, I felt not fear, but anticipation. Because I realized that while they thought they were orchestrating the end of my career, I was quietly planning the proof that would end theirs. I began quietly assembling my arsenal. Not for confrontation, not for spectacle, but for undeniable evidence. I didn't confront Daniel or Marianne. I didn't make phone calls in anger. Every step was calculated, silent, deliberate. Emails became my allies. Calendar entries, my witnesses. Budget spreadsheets, internal memos, and interdepartmental notes were all carefully copied to a secure drive I alone could access. I cross-referenced Thomas's meetings with sudden policy changes, Marianne's promotions with confidential financial projections, and Daniel's approvals with the timing of my transition discussions. I even consulted Arthur Reed, a retired accountant who had helped me before. When I explained the patterns, he didn't flinch. He didn't moralize. He said, "This isn't about who's sleeping with whom. This is manipulation. Control. They're playing the board, not the people." I smiled to myself, quietly. Because now, for the first time, I wasn't just observing. I was building a chain of incontrovertible facts. And every fact was a step closer to the moment they believed I would quietly accept. Little did they know, the quietest person in the room often delivers the loudest truth. The question was, when would I strike, and would they even see it coming? Just as the pieces were falling into place, a complication arose. One afternoon, I noticed an unexpected audit flagged by internal compliance, a routine check, they claimed, but suspiciously timed. My secure files had briefly been accessed from a shared workstation. Someone had started noticing anomalies. Marianne's posture became subtly sharper in meetings. Daniel's casual smiles were tinged with tension I hadn't seen before. Thomas started sending cryptic memos about information integrity and document traceability. I realized they were onto something, not everything, but enough to sense I was no longer the passive observer they had expected. The risk was clear: one careless exposure, one premature accusation, and my silent plan could unravel. The evidence I'd painstakingly collected could be questioned, dismissed, or even used against me. Yet fear didn't take me. It sharpened me. Every document was double-checked. Every email timestamp verified. Every chain of approvals catalogued. I understood something vital: silence alone wouldn't win. Precision would. Patience would. And I had both. But I also knew that in the next step, one false move could ignite the storm before I was ready. The real question lingered in my mind: could I stay invisible until the moment the truth had to be revealed? I realized the final phase required a sacrifice. Not of dignity or principle, but of comfort and certainty. To keep the investigation undisputed, I had to distance myself from colleagues I trusted implicitly, even from those who might have alerted me to subtle office whispers. Casual lunches ended. Friendly chats vanished. Even small confidences were withheld. Every personal connection became a potential leak. I spent nights alone, meticulously cross-referencing emails, meeting notes, and spreadsheets. My personal life shrank to the size of a locked office and a secure drive. I didn't see Daniel beyond formal dinners. Marianne's presence became a measured observation from across the office. The hardest part was knowing that while I sacrificed friendships and peace of mind, they remained free, laughing in meetings, enjoying the illusion of victory. They believed my quiet retreat was submission. It wasn't. It was preparation. Every sacrificed comfort, every strained silence, every small emotional denial built toward one inevitable confrontation, one meeting where the carefully documented truth would speak louder than anger, louder than betrayal, louder than charm. The question now, when the final trap was sprung, would they realize too late that they had underestimated the quietest observer in the room? The day of the executive meeting arrived like any other, but I carried a hidden weight: 32 years of observation, 22 years of evidence, and months of silent preparation. Every document, email, and calendar entry was organized, time-stamped, and cross-referenced. Every subtle manipulation, every conflict of interest, every secret alignment was mapped out in a dossier I alone controlled. I walked into the boardroom calmly, carrying only my laptop and a folder. No accusations. No raised voices. No theatrics. Daniel smiled, Marianne smirked, Thomas radiated quiet authority. They believed the game was still theirs. As the presentation began, I displayed the facts. Not feelings. Not suspicions. The board saw emails linking Thomas to confidential projections, Marianne's promotions timed to preempt my role, and Daniel's approvals coinciding with orchestrated transitions. Each piece connected, forming a web they could no longer deny. Faces tightened. Smiles faded. Control evaporated. The trap closed silently, leaving no room for excuses. By the time anyone realized what had happened, the real show was over. And for the first time since the gala, I felt the calm thrill of inevitability. The room went silent. Not a single word of denial could undo what the evidence had already revealed. The board absorbed every detail: the emails, the spreadsheets, the meeting notes. Marianne's calculated smile faltered. Thomas's confident posture stiffened. Daniel's casual demeanor collapsed into the smallest flicker of guilt. The control they had so meticulously curated evaporated under the weight of facts. HR stepped forward. Policies were cited. Conflicts of interest highlighted. Every manipulation, every orchestrated betrayal, every attempt to remove me quietly was laid bare. No shouting. No dramatic confrontations. Just clarity. Just truth. Marianne was immediately suspended pending review. Thomas, cornered, tendered his resignation before the board could act. Daniel was reevaluated and reassigned to a less influential role. The restructuring plan that had threatened my career was revised. My position remained untouched, intact, undeniable, and respected. For a moment, I let myself exhale. The people who believed they were orchestrating my downfall now faced the consequences of their own strategy. And I realized, finally, that the show Thomas had promised had been mine all along. Next, we'll close the story with what came after: the consequences, the clarity, and the quiet triumph that no one expected. Months later, I returned to the Grand Meridian Hotel, the same crystal chandeliers, the same polished marble, but it no longer held fear or betrayal. It held closure. I had stayed. I had watched. I had documented. I had waited. And in the end, I walked away on my own terms, not as a victim, but as the only one who remained intact. Daniel and I no longer shared a home, only conversations tempered by honesty. No shouting. No recriminations. He admitted quietly, almost reluctantly, "I thought you'd always be there." I looked at him, calm, unshaken. I was. "You just stopped seeing me." Marianne was gone. Thomas was gone. The empire they had tried to manipulate crumbled around their own hubris. My career, decades of loyalty, intelligence, and diligence, wasn't just preserved. It was recognized. Respected. Untouched by their schemes. And in that silence, I understood the truth. The real show had never been the kiss. The real show had been the reckoning. The exposure of hidden agendas. The patience that outlasted betrayal. I had not won by destroying them. I had won by being smarter, quieter, and more deliberate. And as I left the hotel, stepping into sunlight that felt like permission, I whispered to myself. The quietest moves make the loudest impact. And I am still standing. If this story of patience, strategy, and quiet justice resonated with you, don't just watch, take a moment to engage. Like the video if you've ever felt underestimated or betrayed, comment below sharing what you would have done in Evelyn's place, and subscribe to the channel to follow more stories where intelligence and restraint triumph over deception. Every click, every comment, every subscription helps bring these powerful stories to life, and reminds us all that sometimes, the quietest moves leave the loudest impact.